Hi there, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar, the Talivest webinar on how to build a diverse and inclusive workplace. I have the pleasure of being joined with some amazing panelists here today who are going to walk us through their experiences, what they've been like, and share some insights with us around what they've done to actually drive diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And as we go through this process, please jump in with questions. We'll be asking you some polls, and we will be taking questions from the audience as we go through this webinar. So first off, let me thank everyone who has joined us today for jumping online. We are really excited to have you here, and we would like to go through our webinar process with you. So I'd like to first of all introduce myself. My name is David Kenny. I'm the head of sales for Talivest. And I have quite a bit of background in working in diversity and inclusion programs in various different companies such as Disney, the Ritz-Carlton, Gartner, and Human Resources in general, and joined Talivest, where we are a company that focuses on people analytics in areas such as diversity and inclusion. I'd like to go through then the next person, who is Vessy Tasheva, and you can see her on your screen. Vessy is a diversity and inclusion consultant. She's the founder of the eponymously named Vessy.com and author of the 2019 Diversity in the Workplace report, which is a really fascinating piece of work which covers some really powerful insights from diversity and inclusion leaders throughout the world. And it's great to see the variations that happen across multiple geographies there. Vessy works with businesses in Ireland and Bulgaria to help them identify and remove obstacles to inclusion and talent growth. Vessy, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to announce that I'm also working with businesses in the UK. This is a recent change. The report is fantastic. It covers 10 companies from 10 countries, quite a bunch from the UK, South Africa, India, Australia, Germany, Sweden, the US. So definitely check it out if you want to see examples like what people were struggling with and how they're overcoming those challenges within their companies. Very, very genuine stories.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that. Then next we have Ciara Kelly. Ciara is the managing director and founder of FUTURENEERZ. FUTURENEERZ helps organizations better understand their changing workforce and advises them on how to best engage, motivate, and manage multi-generational talent. So it's a different facet of diversity and inclusion than perhaps we're used to seeing in most organizations. This is achieved, or Ciara achieves this through a strengths-based development and coaching program. If any of you have gone through the woo process, you will know where that comes from. Ciara is the person that brings the woo, and she will explain that in a little bit more detail. So she works mainly in Ireland. She works with companies like Grant Thornton, Brown Thomas and Arnott's. And Ciara, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm just really happy to be here. As I said, yes, I do the woo, but I'm a Gallup strength coach and executive coach. So I use the Clifton strengths to really bring the power of everybody's individual talents and strengths to the team and really empower them to do their best work and thrive. So I'm delighted.
Thanks for being here. And then next we have Sharon Vize. Sharon is the Group HR Director with CPL Resources here, which is headquartered in Ireland but operates throughout the world. Sharon leads the diversity and inclusion initiatives at CPL, and she's a member of the CPL leadership team. CPL is kind of a special company for us here because it is the first Irish publicly listed company that was a female CEO and founder, Anne Herity, and Sharon reports directly to Anne as part of that leadership team. Sharon's a fellow of the CIPD and has is a long-standing volunteer with Special Olympics. She's a swim coach in the Eastern region, and CPL has been recognised 5th year in a row as Great Places to Work in the large workplaces category. It is currently placed 14th. So Sharon is a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and you really notice that as soon as you walk into CPL. There are clients of ours, and so we have occasion to go and visit them quite frequently, and you definitely notice that there is a very powerful commitment to diversity and inclusion at multiple levels in CPL, which makes it a really great place to spend time. CPL was the first recruitment agency to set up an LGBT ally network, and was very privileged to have our Taoiseach Leo Varadkar as a guest speaker on the day that they launched that program, sharing his personal insights with CPL colleagues, which was very, very powerful. Sharon, is there anything you'd like to add to your introduction?
No, I'm just delighted to be on this webinar today, David. Thank you so much. And I hope I'll be able to share our experience at CPL around the whole D&I area. So just really delighted to be contributing today.
Brilliant. And then Sharon, we're delighted to have you here and to learn exactly what you've done to make CPL the workplace that it is. What we did to kick this off was we went out and asked everybody who'd signed up in advance, all those nice early bird people that had, got their acceptances and everything in nice and in a punctual way. We had gone out and asked them what it is that they wanted us to ask everybody. So we have some really cool questions that came in from our audience, and they're actually even coming in now. We may get to those later if we get a chance, but we wanted to ask you some of these questions here. So I'm acting as a bit of a proxy for the audience, and if this is your question and you're connected, make sure that you type in some follow-up in the chat box on the webinar, because we definitely would like to give you the opportunity to drill down and ask our speakers some more specific information if you can. I know that they'd be very eager to do that too. So the first question is, can you describe what amazing diversity and inclusion looks like? Who's doing it and what value does it bring? And obviously we want to look outside just, purely a sort of a business case here, but also look at, the other aspects of it too, which are from a sort of societal and this is the right thing to do perspective, which is obviously a powerful driver, certainly in the recruitment space. So the first person I'm going to ask that question of is Vessy. Vessy, would you mind sharing with us some of your insights on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, usually when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we talk how it's approached within a company or within an ecosystem, and that's very much limited in a country or like a subsection of an industry, let's say the tech industry or whatever. The thing is that D&I is very much like climate change. We cannot tackle climate change if we just focus on one city or one county or one country or even like the European Union. It's something that we need to do together globally. So similarly with D&I, to have sustainable, long-term lasting change in society, in communities, and in societies around the world, we need to collaborate. So collaborations are key outside of the organization. If you look at an individual organization, we should think about it as layers. When we look at the leadership team, is D&I aligned with their values? Sometimes it is, in other cases it isn't. I'll give you some examples for companies that are naturally having this very well. Then what's the role of the D&I leader? Do they have enough authority? Do they have enough influence? So we're talking about personal qualities, but also even like the relationships that they have within the organization, the personal relationships that they have, not just the professional relationships. And then hasn't the organization actually defined why diversity and inclusion is important for them? For example, is it of an importance in terms of their business strategy, or is it just for employer branding, or is it seen as like, okay, this is our way to listen to our customers better, to understand them better, to provide more value to them? These are very different reasons, and it could be a mixture of those. But there are situations when, let's say, the CEO gives a call to the HR team and says, D&I will be very important for us. Okay, now here is the budget, and go fix it. If there is no understanding why it's important, even if the leader who's giving the call is genuine about it, it's very hard to communicate this throughout the organization and have change happen. So the why is key here. I'll give you a couple of examples. Zuna is it's one of the companies that I interviewed for the report. They're based in South Africa. They operate in the sub-Saharan region. Fantastic example. It's part of their business strategy It's how they enter new markets. It's how they work with the customer base. It's also how they empower their own customers, and they're making a change that's beyond just, you know, getting the revenue that, you know, they're trying to hit this Q or the next Q. Atlassian would be another good example. Like Zuna is still a few hundred people. It's still a small company. Atlassian is like a $1 billion company in revenue already that has IPO'd. In their case, D&I has been in the values of the founders from day one. And now their global leadership person for D&I has the authority, is working with all of the teams. They have a very research-based approach to D&I. For example, they're auditing the way they do performance reviews. So it isn't just like, hey, let's be really fair, let's remove unconscious bias. Any changes that they have done in their performance review process, they also go into the data after that and look at, are actually, you know, cisgender men more likely to get promoted versus another group? So that would be a great example. But again, in the report, there would be a few more companies, but I think that, you know, we have Atlassian, the big one, but budget is not always required. And that's why it's important to look at the Zuna example.
Yeah. And then from a data perspective, then you're saying Atlassian start in terms of they make changes and then assess before and after what the actual impact of those changes has been?
Yeah, because they're saying basically whatever, as much as you can be aware about unconscious bias, for example, when you evaluate someone during their performance review, it is objective to a certain degree. You know, as much as you can measure, you know, did they meet their targets, or are they developing the skills that you expect, or do they portray the behavior, you know, the values that this organization appreciates and encourages? It is still kind of objective, subjective, sorry. So then it's important to see, even after the changes that they have done in the performance review process, look into the data and see how much it has been corrected. Okay. So they do this in different areas of the organization.
So it's like impact assessment stuff. That's really cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sharon, some examples from CPL as to what you've done. Can you, I mean, it's very much live in your organization, so you've done it. How have you done it? How has it worked out? Where did the commitment come from? You know, what's your experience been?
Well, I suppose, David, we're doing it, and we're not done it, and we're not perfect at it. That's the first thing I would say. But I suppose from a CPL perspective, it is driven from the top. We have a female CEO. She was the first female CEO of a public listed company in Ireland. So that in itself tells a story. And we've been in operation for 30 years. And when you look at our board membership, we have 42% female representation on our boards. But diversity, as I would always say, it's not just about gender. There's lots of components to it as such. And I think for any organization to spend time considering the business case around diversity and inclusion, they might miss the boat a little bit. It's, in my view, it's clearly evident, and there's lots of research that, you know, D&I, it has to firmly be on the agenda of an organization. It needs to be part of their mission, their strategy, their values, and it's got to be embedded into the people practices, both internally and also from a client perspective. And I suppose that's the approach that we've taken within CPL. So from an internal perspective, my team is responsible for D&I. We work very closely with the business around that. HR don't take ultimate responsibility. We have to get everybody involved with it. And then externally, we have a D&I representative who, I suppose, because of the type of business that we do, we're a talent organization. So it's very important that we're getting the best for our clients in terms of the practices and the procedures and the processes and that. From an inclusion perspective, I would see that that's where we can really see where we're making changes within our organization and where we're actually having an impact. So what we've done is we've clearly defined within our business, we've got 6 key pillars that we have under the D&I stream. And they are our LGBT network, an ally network, which is Be Proud. And lots of organizations have that. But what that group actually does and who runs it. So it's run by our people as such. But I always remember back when we set up our LGBT and ally network and we reached out to our organization, we were astounded at, I suppose, the engagement that it created within our business. And one of the things that we did, and what we always see within CPL, it's always about sharing stories. People can actually then connect with what inclusion means if you have personal stories to tell. And we did a very powerful thing with our LGBT ally group. We actually created a video where people shared their stories. And people came forward within the organisation that other colleagues had no idea that they were part of the LGBT community. And the powerful stories that they gave was absolutely amazing. And when you think about, I suppose, the traction that gave to the committee and to the wider work that they've done since then has been absolutely fantastic. We've also done fantastic work around what we call our disability group, but we refer to, I suppose, talk about it on the basis of ability and giving people opportunities with a disability in the workplace. And we have a fantastic relationship with the Trinity Centre for People with Intellectual Disabilities. And we partnered with them about 2 years ago where we were giving individuals with an intellectual disability some support around CV development, interview skills, and like we're experts in that field. So it's very easy to get our recruiters, people within our business to go into Trinity and help people who are within a program within Trinity around that. But what transpired from that, we were at an event one day and the MC at the event, a young lady called Maylin Yap, who has Down syndrome, approached us and said, "You're a recruitment agency, so why can't you find me a job?" And that really resonated with our CEO and with key people on our leadership team. And it's like, why can't we find Maylin a job? So what we did was we spent a lot of time with Maylin in terms of coaching her, her CV, her interview skills, etc. But we actually gave her a placement in CPL for a 6-month period where she had an opportunity to experience all of our teams, or a number of our teams, I should say. Excuse me. And what's happened now is that Maylin is actually a permanent employee in CPL. She works in HR. She has a clearly defined role, but we've put supports and mechanisms in place. Now, it's been very much a learning curve for us, but we've been very practical in how we've done that. So we've considered, you know, like, what training does Maylin need? How do we actually understand her disability? And how can we make sure that we give her the best experience that she possibly can have? And I often think that people are hesitant to take on people in the workplace with an intellectual disability because they just think, well, how are they going to fit into our environment? How are they actually going to cope with the way in which we do things? How are they going to know how to behave or to do this or to do that? But the question that you really have to ask is, well, what is it that we need to do to accommodate this individual and to make their role and the structure and the environment that they work in help them? Because people, you know, who do suffer from an intellectual disability, you need to adjust and you need to provide a different type of support mechanism. And I have to say, we've been completely blown away with the impact of actually entering into that arrangement. We now have another individual, Marion, who works for us, who has autism. And I just can only see that that's actually going to get better and better for us. So I suppose my long-winded answer to it all is that it's about applying the practical application to it and really sitting down and thinking about, well, what is it can I actually do? We can think about all this sort of blue sky stuff in terms of it's great for our strategy, it's great, you know, to be seen from an external perspective, but what does it actually mean internally to be doing this? So, so like we've had great success on it. So it's the practical application of it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, and again, it's one of the things you notice when you go in there. It's like, you know, you can start off with the why not, but you start off with the why, you know, and
yeah, exactly.
And how you do it. And it's really good. I mean, because, you know, one aspect of diversity promotes others, you know, and when you get to ones that traditionally a lot of organizations think are outside the possible, you know, then it makes all the other ones seem so much, you know, so much more insignificant, I suppose. That's really, you know, in terms of their complexity to achieve them, that's really powerful.
Yeah, and just also to say, we ran an event last year for National Disability Day, and we had Sinead Keane, who is a speaker around the whole area of diversity and inclusion, and she's actually blind. And she said to me, she said, what she finds amazing is that she goes to so many companies and she always says to, you know, the CEO or the HR or someone from the leadership team, how many people do you have working for you that have a disability? And she said 9 times out of 10, it's 0. And I think that in itself is quite powerful, that we all want to know more, but it's actually, well, how do we, and do we really want to actually take the next step? And that's the inclusion piece. That's the actual doing piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that as well, the inclusion is so important. I mean, you touched on that, Sharon, in terms of that sense of belonging. And from what I do with the FUTURENEERZ and how I help the teams is really about creating that inclusive environment so that teams can thrive. And in that, people need to feel valued. They need to feel they're part of a team, and their opinions matter and are treasured. And I always like the analogy of a very simple, bringing it back to the basics. But when you think about D&I, it's like diversity has been invited to the dance, and inclusion is about being asked to dance, and and actually love that dance and own that dance. So get into your groove and share that. And with that, then you can bring everybody's unique talents and values and contributions. They can nearly gives them the opportunity to give them freedom to be their authentic self, to really own who they are and who they truly are. And if I can take from, for me, when you look at inclusion, particularly when you're trying to create that inclusion and that sense of inclusiveness, it's all about individuality and that sense of belonging. And Gallup did a number of research and studies, and they did one on 200 organizations and really looking at what are the conditions to thrive when you are looking at inclusion. And one of the key things there's respect, and you've touched on that, both Vessy and Sharon. It's having been treated with respect, and that everybody is seen for who they are and respected for that and valued. But what's really nice as well, what I love as well, is that employees are valued for their strengths. They're actually valued for what they bring to the table and how they can contribute to the business. So once they're clear on that managers then see everybody as unique individuals and how they actually can contribute in their own unique way. And the power of that then is enabling, and I think you touched on this as well, Vessy, is doing the right thing. Leaders need to do the right thing, but it's our collective mindset and our collective responsibility. Is not just about the leaders of the business. It's everybody can actually treat everybody with respect, but also managers. And I'm real passionate about the middle management. So, senior management gets a lot of support in businesses in terms of how to roll out D&I, for example. But when you get to the middle management and then the teams, how to really, operationalize it. And Sharon, you touched on how to embed it into the people's practices. And that's where I'm really passionate about. How do you bring that and support managers and how to be the best manager you can be and care about people and the teams, and enable environments to really be places where people's opinions matter, and that they have clear understanding of how, what values and what strengths do they bring to the table, and have they the opportunity to do what they do best, so that they actually bring their best selves to work. And that's,
I think it's very, very powerful in terms of what it drives in a team, even a very small team, in terms of how the team behaves and the level of confidence they have about expressing their own opinions. It fundamentally changes the way that the organization makes decisions. It's very, very powerful. I'm going to jump to a poll, if that's okay. So everyone in the webinar, if you can just get ready to click on a poll question that's going to be popping up in front of you. And the question is laid out very clearly, but basically it says, what's the #1 reason your leaders care about diversity and inclusion? This is not necessarily hugely scientific, but we just wanted to get an opinion as to what your thoughts are on this, and we'll include that in the next follow-up in the webinar. In the next question. One of the things I wanted to touch on was the question came in, Sharon, which you mentioned 6 pillars and asking what the 6 pillars are, and I'm going to test myself on this one by actually seeing if I can remember them, because you are so adamant about everyone in the organization knowing them in detail. And I'm thinking I've got them, which is they're multicultural, they're disability, be proud, working parents, generations, and your carers group. Is that
working parents and carers group, and gender balance.
Brilliant, cool, got it. Okay.
Yeah,
and then how did you come up with those? Was that just a kind of a leadership activity, or was that something that you worked out with the entire organization?
No, I think I'll tell you what we did. First of all, we did a survey called the Sense of Us survey. We did it last year. because I think what we wanted to understand was, well, what's the makeup of our organization? And I think from a HR perspective, you know, you can read so much and you can Google everything you want and you can come up with your lovely pillars. But what does that actually mean? What's going on within the organization, and does it meet your employee, I suppose, perspectives and needs? So we did the survey, Sense of Us survey, and what we found out from that was that we have 26 nationalities within our team of 1,100 people. Now that's amazing in itself, and that's across Ireland, UK, and Central Eastern Europe. Our age demographic, we've got about 44% of our people who are between the age of 26 and 35. 47% of our employees are Catholic, and the rest range from absolutely from everything. And 17% of our workforce, they actually provide help or care to a family member or friend who is actually sick. And that in itself was an astonishing statistics that we found. And 10% of our workforce actually have a disability. So, and that can range from anything from intellectual disability to vision impairment. And that was really interesting. And we also asked a question around personality types. So around extroversion and introversion. And 41% of our organization classifies themselves as introversion. And I know there's a lot of talk and a lot of research around that space as well. But I think what we want to do, as I said at the beginning, was really get a sense, well, what is our workforce made up of? Mm-hmm. How does that translate then into what activities or what programs do we need to put in place? And when we have, with our pillars in place, it's not about having, you know, an event every week or every month or a couple of years around those pillars, but it's more about sharing knowledge, getting people to talk about the issues within those pillars and to exchange ideas, to exchange stories, etc. And that's really where it's coming from a CPL perspective in terms of what it is that we want to achieve. It's about knowledge sharing and about people just having that open opportunity to talk about and what inclusivity means within those 6 pillars. And some have gained more traction than others. You know, we don't have a D&I lead across our business. It's sort of shared as such across the whole business, across a range of different people. So as I say, some areas, you know, tend to do more work in some areas, but they're all there and they're all live at the moment. Mm.
Brilliant. Based on what you just said, I'm actually going to skip forward a question, if that's okay. We have the poll results coming in, which are pretty interesting, but I wanted to really touch on, you mentioned the introvert versus extrovert piece. And I know that that's an area specifically for Ciara that you spend a lot of time on with clients, with your, you know, analysis with Gallup, etc. Can you talk a little bit about that specifically? You know, what can be done to sort of to celebrate D&I or make D&I more effective with respect to personality? You know, most particularly with the kind of introvert and extrovert piece. I mean, the open office environment, the way, you know, the meetings are run, even this kind of stuff, you know, to a certain extent excludes certain populations based upon their, you know, their personality and characteristics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite interesting, Sharon, you said that 41% of your company are introverts, and that brings a different lens through which you see the world. And what I love to work with teams is very much about focusing on their strengths and what they contribute to the business and their talents and how they see the world. And if you take strengths as a concept of and enable people to really understand who they really are and what they can contribute, it actually brings a beautiful color to the team. And if you give that insight to both the self-awareness of that person, but also to the manager to really understand their team and see, okay, what are the individual talents of the team? What do they bring? And if they are introvert, then you need to understand how do you actually bring the best out in that person and to respect that person in that way. So not label at all, it's actually bringing a common language. And that's what I like about the Gallup strengths, is that you're bringing a common language that actually nearly supercharges and fast tracks you getting to know that person in a really, really great way. So you're bringing in the emotional intelligence of one, build your self-awareness around who you are and what you offer and what motivates you, but also what demotivates you, what kills you and what drives you mad, and be able to share that with the team. And then equally having the manager being confident in nurturing the team and those conversations so that everybody brings their best to work. and that everybody is respected in that way. And I love that. So strengths in my way is like a bridge for D&I. It actually helps get people to understand themselves better, but also the teams to understand themselves better at a deeper level. And it also then, as I said, will fast track. So I think if we look at that and look at what's right with people as opposed to what's wrong with people, I think we're starting at a really powerful way. And then equally, then you can go deeper in terms of, I've had with Irish Distillers was a prime example. I worked with a team, and it was lovely to actually work with a team that, you know, had very diverse strengths, and how they actually collaborated. Sharon, you talked about collaboration hugely. How they collaborated more, how they communicated better, how they actually had difficult conversations. So that it's not all happy clappy and, you know, focusing on the positives. It's actually being able to use a language so that it's not defensive at all. It's very much, this is who you are, and people are understanding where they're coming from. It's a lens through which you see the world, but also you're putting yourself in other people's shoes. And that's hugely important. And that's empathy that you talked about. It's hugely important as a competency and as a strength for a leader. Because ultimately, when we look at really creating these inclusive environments, you're talking about creating engaged, thriving workplace. And for me, what's really powerful, and you touched on engagement before, is that 70% of engagement is down to the manager. So it's not about the top level. It's about everybody has an opportunity and a responsibility to really drive engagement and support everybody in the best possible way. But, you know, if we can support the manager, 70% is huge. So yeah, I don't know if you got Sharon, you probably have seen that in your action, because you're breathing it.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose we participate, you know, as David mentioned at the beginning, in the Great Place to Work survey. And a core component is that it is around measuring trust.
Yeah.
Trust score at the moment is, and I'll be killed if I get this wrong, is about 74-75%. And of course we want that to be much higher. Yeah. In our survey, we have a participation level of 82%. So we people are, you know, they want to tell us how they feel about the organisation and about how it's run, about our leadership and all of that. But when we drill down into the scores, and we look at, say, particular around diversity and inclusion and around culture, our scores are really high in that area. The trust score, it all feeds back into the trust score, like camaraderie, pride, all of those things are really high. But we know we still have lots of stuff to work on within that as such. And it's a great measure. It gives you a great sort of starting point in terms of need to keep chipping away at. And I'm not saying by any means that we have it right. We've got a long road ahead of us in terms of our engagement, but it's a real start to us. But I think one of the fundamental things is it's about getting your people involved, and you are right, it's about making sure that your managers, you know, your people managers have the right skill set and nurtured and they're coached. And we do lots of work in CPL around understanding emotional intelligence. We run lots of team building programs, you know, using the DISC profile so people understand, you know, how different people operate. You know, that's really valuable, you know. And even as recently as last week, we're starting to roll out a program around mental health awareness. So, you know, managers and people with responsibility for people can understand, you know, the impact of mental health, you know, on individuals within their team. And what signs they should look out for. So there's so much that goes on. And as you say, that's a bridge into D&I. It most definitely is, you know, it's all connecting, and most definitely, you know, definitely is.
Vessy, can you talk a little bit about, because you've worked at a very global level, and you've got a lot of experience of different, you mentioned Israeli companies, etc., and you've obviously, you know, yourself have a very global perspective. One of the things I noticed, at the risk of it being a cliche, when I worked in Israel, is that people are really very assertive, you know, in the way that they engage. And so a lot of the things, like, you know, you might be more likely to be introverted in that kind of an environment than you might be in another one. Do you see that showing up do you see kind of national variations around that and levels of concern around that in your surveys?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be able to speak about Israel. I actually haven't been there, and I haven't worked that much with Israeli. Maybe we were talking about another country, but so I'm originally from Bulgaria, and for example, moving to Ireland, you get to like the language that is used when you give feedback to someone is completely different. And you know, I'm sure some of you are familiar. Eastern Europeans can be a bit more straightforward / blunt. It's, you know, it's also a personality thing. But in Ireland, when I first moved here, and it was an all Irish team. Everyone was from a different county. We were talking about healthcare. It was a lot going on, so it was hard to catch up. But it's like, oh my God, I don't know that much about healthcare at that point, and catching up with all of the accents that people have. It was fun. But then you know, people would give feedback like, you know, sorry to bother. I don't, you know, I'm probably wrong, but perhaps this could be something that you could consider, but, you know, feel free to ignore me. And you're like, yeah, and the feedback is, you know, so that's very much the style. And in Bulgaria, for example, if we say like, hey, let's, you know, let's start having daily scrum meetings, you know, like a daily stand-up, people would just say, no, that's shit. And it's, here in Ireland, you wouldn't know when there is an issue because feedback is given in a very subtle way. A lot of the communication is nonverbal. That's beyond the personalities. While in Bulgaria, it's very straightforward. Also, the body language is a bit more expressive, being a southern country. So there's so many layers when we talk about diversity and inclusion. A lot of it is cultural. A lot of it has to do with, you know, your background that is not necessarily related to geographical location. It's definitely helpful when we have been working with a number of countries, and my experience is international, to kind of have an open mind, to listen, to communicate actively, sometimes to ask questions, to ask very specific questions so you can understand if you're on the same page. Because the things that someone might be implying and what you're extracting out of this, regardless of your backgrounds, it's miscommunication that results in conflicts. And if we go back to the Gallup strengths, I love them. I'm a little bit of a fanatic about them. In my previous company, we were hiring people based on Gallup strengths. It was at one of the later stages. Many times for like conflict resolution, like let's say an employee would come to me and they're like, you know, I have a challenge communicating this with one of the other people on the marketing team that I was leading. And I would kind of like lead them how they should be approaching this person and explain, you know, so all of the strengths will be accessible to everyone in the organization. And that was voluntary. So I'll be like, you know, this person, you know, their strength is, let's say, input, you know, you should approach them maybe more in this way. I hear what you're saying. We can just, you know, just frame it a little bit this way so they can actually hear what you're saying. And then, you know, they'll come back and they'll be like, it was, yeah, I think it was a good, you know, conversation. We're getting there. And it's a learning process. You know, I love the example with like being invited to the party and, you know, the metaphor about inclusion. And I'm always like, but is being enough to the party enough? Because think about, you know, if it's like a prom or Debs, do you think all of the students, especially as teens, feel like they belong there? Or do some of them feel like, oh my God, I'm such a loser, no one will talk to me, or no one will dance with me, etc. So I think the difficult part with D&I is, you know, great, you know, we have attracted talent from all kinds of underrepresented groups. They feel included. Yes, we're not being, let's say, like bluntly racist to them, or, you know, there are no extreme behaviors or trying to support them, but do they actually feel like they belong? And here, interviews with employees are quite key, so we can understand how do they feel, because when there is a direct conflict, let's say racism, because it's kind of, you know, it can be a harsh experience. In Ireland, or actually the majority of the Western world, where confrontation is not so direct, it's very hard for you as an underrepresented person to go to HR or the owner of the company or leadership and say like, this person makes me feel like I shouldn't be here. How do you say that? They'll be like, you got issues. Like that's not, so how do you empower those people? And the only way to do that is to actually be proactive and ask about their experiences. So employee engagement surveys are great. They give you kind of like a signal in general about, like the Q12 of Gallup and, Culture Amp have engagement surveys, but they don't tell you why it's happening. And this is where interviews with the employees tell you the story. And for example, when I come into a company, I'm an external person, so they know it's all anonymous. Like I'm not the HR who maybe has, coffee with their, I don't know, manager twice a week, whatever. So everything is anonymous, and you can basically I predispose them to share those personal stories that are not important enough to be brought to the attention of HR, but they need help. They need to be asked so they can share them. When I talk about belonging and the importance of being proactive as an employer to ask those questions, I always give this example. There was a study in Ireland where adults were asked, it was about a bit over 4,000 Irish people were asked if they had ever experienced unwanted sexual experience. And 1 in 5 people said yes, which was quite a striking number. So we have to clarify, this is an unwanted sexual experience before age 17. So the 1 in 5 said yes. And when they asked them, have you shared about this with anyone at any point of your life? And these are adults. 47% said no. And they asked them okay, so why didn't you ever talk to anyone about this? That's half of the people, and this is quite an important experience, and it's important that they share it. They said, well, honestly, no one asked me before this research. And it's very similar. You don't have to have people visibly upset at work so that you can take action. We need to be proactive. We need to understand if they feel like they belong. What are the subtle experiences or not so subtle that are happening to them? Empowering them to share them, and then working towards what can be changed. Is it a matter of policies or the culture?
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because one of the things we find with one of the things we do is what we call the always-on polling, which is the ability to ask, a lot of questions in a very non-structured way, or in a very sort of analytical way, but you can ask the questions just one at a time, so it's not it's a once a year snapshot, and you can ask them by specific groups. And one of the things we find in that is you often will get very different responses, because people will actually go in and answer the questions as the situation occurs. And so they start giving you a heads up as to what might be the issue, when you wouldn't necessarily want to go into HR and say, I want to register a complaint, or whoever, I want to actually make a complaint about this because it might not be that serious. Our experience in the past hasn't been that positive doing that. And it gives them almost a sort of powder keg and a heads up as to what's happening. So you've got the extrovert introvert thing plays into that in a big way too, because the extroverted people are going to be really clear about, hey, I'm really uncomfortable with this. But if you're introverted, you might not be. We have the results of the poll back, so I'm going to share those really quickly. And we asked 2 questions. What is the #1 reason your leaders care about diversity and inclusion? And you should be seeing these poll results now on the screen. And how much of a priority is diversity and inclusion to senior leaders in your company? And we did ask to avoid getting sued, which thankfully nobody answered. Yes, this is the reason why. Which I think is possibly a very positive thing. So we basically have huge business value is 17% of attendees. Customers demanding it is 4% on the #1 reason for diversity and inclusion. Employees demanding it is 17%. And it's the right thing to do is 61%. And on our second question, which was how much of a priority is diversity and inclusion to senior leaders in your company, And we're getting the most important priority is 17%, which is actually pretty high. Our top priority, but not the most important, is the category winner at 65%. And then not important at all, unfortunately, is 4%. And so we can sell, so we can see here, not very important is also 13%. So we're getting, you know, a lot of people. The title of the webinar probably tipped that in our favor, but nonetheless, there are quite a percentage of the population, almost 1/5 of our participants who voted here, which is less than half. We have 20% of them have identified not very important or not important at all. So there's still obviously a lot of opportunity, a lot of things that we can do to address that. What do you think of those results? Do they surprise you? Are you, you know, concerned by them? What are your thoughts? Panelists. Sharon, what do you think?
No, I'm not surprised by them. I probably would have answered, I suppose, the orange where it would have come up. I suppose, like from a leadership and an organisational perspective, D&I is important, but it's important along with lots of other things. You know, and I believe that. And I think the challenge for a HR professional is, is to make sure that, you know, they have the support within their organisation, that it's driven from the top, that it's not just dumped on HR's lamp. You know, because HR don't have the solutions to everything. You know, it's very much got to be a partnership within the organisation, and the organisation has to believe it. And like I said, it's got to, you know, formulate part of your values and your business objectives of where you want to be. You know, and when you look at the employee experience, it's got to touch every component of that. You know, right through from attraction, right through to when somebody leaves your organisation, and it's the whole mix in the middle of that. You know.
Yeah.
So not surprised by them.
I used to work with an extraordinary HR leader, and one of her favorite expressions was, if you permit it, you promote it. So in a way that you're kind of willing to go like, yeah, well, you know, no one was hurt kind of thing. And then, but in reality, like you've actually kind of, you know, by just letting it slide, you've actually, you know, you're already saying tacitly, we approve this. And I think in a way, even though, you know, obviously we have huge empathy for the people that don't have, that have clicked those ones and said they're in organizations where they don't think it matters. At the same time, they need to, you know, make a decision themselves and take action. And maybe that action is leave, you know, but maybe the action is also just confront it and say, I'm really not happy with this.
Exactly.
In an environment where that's actually very feasible.
And also, David, there's also, an opportunity to, and I think you touched on it, Sharon, about inclusive leadership, but also compassionate leadership, to care about people. And that's, you know, even if you're at a certain level, if it's a manager level or you're within a team, it's to see that person for who they are and actually ask, how are you? So you touched on it, Vessy, about having more regular check-ins, and those check-ins can take, you know, 5 minutes. How are you getting on? What's going on? And then you can start, not just do operational, you know, work in progress, operational check-ins, which is all about the tasks. It's about the person and having more developmental conversations around the person and how they're getting on. I think if we start creating much more of an opportunity to do that, it becomes second nature. It becomes part of the culture and part of the ways of working. That's going to make a change, and that's everybody's responsibility. You know,
I think that has I witnessed it having a really strong impact on employee engagement. So I was managing an international team, and based on the Strengths Finder, and we were having one-on-ones every 2 weeks. So for 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on the topics that we would have to discuss. And it will be the employee bringing the topics. So it's their commitment to send me the topics the day before. So, you know, I can prepare as well. It also pushes them to think about it. They come prepared and they drive the agenda, and it was enabling their growth professionally as well as personally. And I think we built a lot of trust. And sometimes, you know, it could be actually 30 minutes talking about, you know, someone in their family being sick, or could be dating challenges, you know, but whatever you boil it down, it's something that they struggle with on a personal level that affects their job. So as the mentoring happens, they're growing as a person. And then it's like you trust each other because you can actually rely on each other.
Yeah,
and that has been amazing. For example, I don't work with that team anymore because it's Vessy.com now, and I'm really close with them, and they still ping me and they're like, no, I'm dealing with this, so the relationship continues.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
And it's both sides. I had a similar experience in a role also where I had a very diverse team working for me, and I learned an awful lot from those conversations too. You learned an awful lot from somebody's personal life, is their concern or their anxieties manifesting this way, and you can help it. You can help them and the team be more successful, but you're also really helping yourself because you're actually beginning to develop skills, empathy skills and listening skills that you didn't have before, which in what I do is really important. And it's really important for everybody, but it's something that I kind of, I like to be strong in. We've got another question I wanted to throw in there, which is, and I'm going to ask you, Sharon, first, if that's okay, which is, it's easy to measure diversity in your organization in a way, and you talked about how you've done that, and the outcomes, etc. And you've gone the next layer with looking at questions around personality types and things. But how do you measure your success on inclusion? And I don't know if there's really a sort of like, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, but just how would you go about doing that? What have you seen? And do you have a metric in place to measure that?
I suppose we take a very simple approach to it, David. We don't have anything scientific, and if anyone has anything out there, I'd love to hear it. But I suppose what we do is that any sort of activity or event or program that we do get feedback from our people in terms of the impact, what they learned from it, or what they liked about it, or what they want to see different about it, if we were to do it again in the future. And I suppose that's one way, that is the way in which we do it at the moment. And we have found that quite effective, and we take that feedback on board. And like, we have champions, we've got over 40 champions throughout our business who we leverage off as well in terms of our programs and events that we're doing, that hit the engagement piece within our culture. And that's really important to us. And we wouldn't be able to do stuff without having them on board. So like, that's really important to us. So I don't have a scientific answer to it, but it's about making sure that you get real tangible feedback, from any of the events and programs that you do. And we find that really invaluable. And, making the conversations open and keeping people talking about the different issues on the table.
Yeah, and actually feeling confident. We had a question come in actually from CK, who has asked about how you do that in an environment where there's a major concern around people being seen as being potentially discriminatory in some way. How do you go about offering feedback, when that might be the concern that is first and foremost in somebody's mind? And I think that ties into that too, which is if you have that open conversation happening, then
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have very clear core values within CPL, and I think we've got braver as time has gone on in terms of addressing behaviour that we don't like seeing within our business. And some people are better at doing that than others. And it's about, creating an environment where it's actually safe to do that. And we strive to do. We don't get it right all the time, but it's one of the things that we do strive to do within our organisation. Because if you can't do that, then it festers lots of other negative things in business. So it's really important to do that.
And I suppose basically on the assumption that it is a blindness, you're not doing it purposefully. It's Ciara, do you have, from a sort of your work with the Gallup assessment tool, etc., do you see the challenges, particularly with certain characteristics and types, where you need to work harder to get them to actually confront situations? Or
well, I think I use the Q12 engagement tool again, and to be honest, most engagement tools will cover most of the areas, but there's 12 key elements in the Q12, and I'd always start a kind of like a reality check at the beginning of the process with the team, and then if it's 6 months or a year, we would look at that. And I kind of like to describe it, if people are struggling, it's great to get a sense of where the team's at the very beginning. Okay, and then you get the results, and it's nearly like a checklist of how to be a great manager, because it looks at, you know, basic needs of, you know, clarity of what's expected of you, giving you the materials and equipment that do your job right, and then moving into individual needs, looking at focus me and value me. So, you know, having the opportunity to do what I do best every day, and then getting recognition. Like high performing teams, it's about giving recognition every seven days. It's not, you know, willy-nilly. It needs to be regular. But what I do then is, if there is certain points or certain results that are low, we look at that with the team lead, and I coach around that and help them and bring the report and the results to the team, and together we come up with solutions, and together we will. And it goes back to if there are issues, it's having an open forum and a safe space to discuss them. And that's really down to the manager and the leaders, and really honoring the values that are in the business, but bringing them to the team sessions, so that there is permission.
One of the things, yeah, absolutely. One of the things, I mean, we see at Talivest is we can do a drill down by manager. So you can actually go and see where concerns show up at different levels. So you can show the whole organization, and it's all green and beautiful. And as we drill down, unfortunately your team turns red. So, you know, we need to sit down and have a chat, and it becomes very apparent. We've got 3 minutes left, which is the perfect amount of time for me to stop talking and for me to ask every one of you. We have 60 seconds, please, from top to bottom. What is the one thing that you would like everyone who is dialed in, who will listen to this webinar, as it'll be in our archive, to actually to do today about, you know, about diversity and inclusion? We all care about it personally, we care about it professionally. So what is the one thing you'd like people to do? And you have literally 60 seconds. So Vessy, I'm going to start with you on the top left.
I'll give you two things. They're simple things. The first one is ask your leadership why diversity and inclusion matters for your company. So you can understand their motivation, you can understand what's next, you can see how you can help out. Whatever it is, you need to understand the why. Maybe they haven't asked themselves. In any case, it's very beneficial. And second, try to book some time with them, even if it's 30 minutes, to understand what their definition of diversity is, what their definition of inclusion is, and what their definition of belonging is. There are organizations where they say, like, we have a lot of nationalities. Does that make it inclusive? That does make it diverse. And maybe there will be different opinions on that. There is no right or wrong answer. So you need to understand where you are, where you sit.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Sharon, next over to you.
Okay, I suppose I agree with what Vessy has said. And then what I would say from continuing on from that is, and one of the things that we did in CPL was to drive inclusive leadership training. And when I talk about leadership, it's not just the guys at the top table. Our training was filtered down across other levels within the organisation. And it's really to understand what the investment is around diversity and inclusion and the impact for you both internally and externally. And, you know, looking at things around behaviours and actions that are expected, you know, of individuals within the organisation. And then I suppose finally looking at unconscious bias, because the training that we did lots of role play, and it really got you thinking about how you actually think about different things within the workplace and your interaction with individuals and how you work with teams and with people. And then the second thing is that I would encourage anyone to do a diagnostic of their organisation, because if you need to have a really clear idea of what it is in front of you within your business in terms of your people makeup, and that will help formulate some of the programs that you want to do.
Fantastic. Really cool. Thank you very much. Ciara, how about you?
I really just, I'd ask everybody to consider what is their personal role in the D&I, in their company. What can they do? Taking all the great insights from Vessy and from Sharon, specifically from the D&I piece. But what is it that you can do? And going back to the piece about unconscious bias, what is your role? And how can you be a spectator of your own thoughts and your own emotions, and to be able to stop yourself, understand your triggers, understand who you are, what you stand for, what your strengths are, and really believe in who you are, but then to watch yourself so that you're not actually contributing to some of the issues in the workplace. That would be a simple but challenging ask.
Fantastic. Listen, for me, it would be, I would like everyone to just sit down, have a conversation, have coffee, have lunch with someone who they think is weird. Because that's kind of what it boils down to. I haven't spoken to before, someone you don't know much about, or someone think may not necessarily share your opinion or points of view. I think that's a great place to start. Listen, I really, really appreciate you all taking the time to join. I know on behalf of all the team at Talivest, we are really grateful for your participation in this process, and we're in awe of what you've achieved in the organizations you work in, and we're very proud to have a relationship with you. So again, thank you very much. We look forward to the next one, where we are hoping to cover the gender pay gap, because, you know, we like to focus on the easy stuff. So we will have multiple accents in that one as well, because we're hoping some participation from Finland. But anyway, we look forward to seeing you all on that next webinar. To everyone that dialed in, we really, really appreciate your time. And again, to all of our panelists, deep and heartfelt gratitude for your time. We are very, very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely.
Thank you.
No problem. Great. Thanks a million.
See you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.